And so, in light of recent events, Friday starting in Canada, and seeing all that occurred with the Emergency Use Authorization Act that Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister, invoked, and then seeing the drastic difference between what the news media reported and what actually happened, because I watched some of it live, I have become convinced. I was already on my way there, but I have become 100% convinced that this is not about your health. The Freedom Convoy protesting the mandates, you would have thought would be about your health, right? They were worried more about the vaccination. At least that's what I thought at first. They were worried about the ill results of the vaccination in the VAERS report that I've talked about in previous episodes. And I was convinced by conviction, you might say, not to take the vaccine. Had I been mandated, I would have quit my job and found another. Wasn't. But I always thought the trucker protest was kind of about that. Maybe, at least. Now that this happened, though, no. No, this is clear. There's something deeper. And it's not just Canada. It's not just about control in Canada. It's not about just liberalism. It's not about Black Lives Matter. It's not about truckers. It's not about jobs. It's not about the vaccine. It's not even about money. It's about something way more sinister and more global. So, with that being said, I'm going to try to explain over the next few weeks and months how this began. My first attempt at that is what you're going to see. It's a episode of me interviewing Kelly G, who I met at a Restore the Republic event, and basically he has like decades, 50 years probably, studying politics and seeing what I wasn't seeing. I wasn't seeing that the news couldn't always be trusted. That was just my default. I believed it until recently. And so here it is. Here's the podcast where I actually ask Kelly G, what's really going on? Like, I have become aware that there's this conspiracy theory called the Cabal, right? So what I basically asked him was, describe it to me. Is it real? And what is it? What does it mean? So that's what this episode's about. Feel free to comment, like, subscribe. Here we go. All right, welcome, Kelly G. Welcome once again. Thanks for joining me. I've been, it's been a rough couple of days with what's going on in Canada and the world, and we've got this chaos that I've been kind of keeping tabs on. Had to kind of take a break from it, but over the last, the holidays. But then now I've got friends in Canada, and they're telling me about what's going on with their news media and with the Freedom Truckers protest that was going on up there. And then yesterday, lady gets trampled on.
Here come the horses.
Oh, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's pretty bad.
Oh, come on through. What is happening here? Wow, what is this lady doing? Trampling horses. Trampling. Stop it. Whoa.
It's terrible.
Oh my God.
This is sad to watch. And she's in the hospital right now with injuries that were pretty bad. I think she's going to live, but it's
God.
over 100 people arrested yesterday. and my own my own circle of friends is and family is just completely, they're actually not all of them, but a few are completely convinced that uh, the truckers are in the wrong in doing this freedom protest. I feel like the truckers are standing up for exactly what's right. And I think there's a lot of people that are going to see what happened yesterday in Ottawa, and then hopefully nobody else gets hurt. But they tear gassed people this morning. I saw. Um, it's just it's awful what's going on, and the videos of people getting arrested, really, it's rough to watch, and to have my own family basically
Hey,
tell me that I'm crazy and that the truckers are basically uneducated idiots that don't understand science. And I'm just like, what is going on? So when I called you and we talked
yeah,
yesterday, the reason I wanted to do this with you is because I think you've been studying this stuff for what, decades?
I I have, yeah. I mean, and it what's going on is no different than it's always been, except for it is heating up. And it's interesting because it's Canada now. 2 summers ago, it was happening in America. We had the riots from the BLM to the Antifa that all seemed to just come along right in the middle of the pandemic, which came right behind the first attempt to impeach Trump. It was just, one case after another, one news cycle that was being pushed out there. But I think that a lot of the time, I kind of call this there's a few things I call the Weather Channel effect. And one is they cover the news like everything is a freaking hurricane hitting New York City. It doesn't matter what it is, but they're putting up charts and things and all the time. Just be afraid, be very, very afraid. We'll tell you what's coming soon. And this is the media that pushes this stuff out there. But what's happening right now with Canada, and it, as I alluded to, it was happening in the United States, but that just didn't seem to wake up enough people. And then we see it going down in Australia. It's going down in New Zealand. And now this revolution, which I'm calling now the Canadian Revolution, is right there on our borders. You can't cross the border. You can't do anything right now. Now, this war is just about here. And so Australia and New Zealand, those were Poland 1938. This is the Blitzkrieg. Canada is France, and the US is, just separated by the English Channel, when the French and the English Channel were. And this is all this is an analogy to how World War II just kind of started. And it wasn't a problem until it affected people. And so
So
many people now have been so misguided by the news and the media that they really are so far off in understanding what's happening that they think that the Canadian truckers are there about the science of vaccination, when they realize that's not what this is about. It is all about control.
well,
And it's
that's one of the things that, yeah, I wanted to play this video. So Tamara Litch, I think that's how
yeah,
you say her last name, gets arrested, I think day before yesterday. She posted a video. She knew she was going to get arrested. She posted this video. Listen to what she says.
I pray that you all find forgiveness in your hearts. And I pray that you all find love, even when we don't understand it. Because there's lots of things that I don't understand. There's a pretty good chance. Well, I think it's inevitable at this point. But I'll probably be going somewhere tomorrow where I'll be getting 3 square meals a day. And that's okay. I'm I'm okay with that. And I want you to know that I am not afraid.
This is who got arrested as
Mhm.
basically the face of the Freedom Convoy.
Switch? Yes.
Are you?
I'm good.
Talk to you here for a second.
Yes.
Oh boy. So you're
Okay.
Let's ask you back up. Should you guys back up, please? Just back up. Thank you.
My coat's wet.
And me. It's wet?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Sean Tyson. I'm not here to arrest you, Sean.
Oh, you will be.
It's me.
What's that?
Because I'm right next there.
If you're going to take her, you got to take
You have to.
Ah, jeez.
Another man that was in the media did an interview with Michaela Peterson, I believe, and started out with just a conversation. Michaela Peterson says or asks him, so was this about the vaccines? And he's like, well, no, it's about freedom. He said, look, the truth is, I'm double vaccinated. I'm not opposed to the vaccine at all.
What exactly is the purpose of the protest?
Two things: to end the mandates on vaccinations, because, and by the way, I'm vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated, and I usually get the flu vaccine every year. So when we're doing the anti-vax thing, sorry, that's not us.
He said, I'm opposed to the mandates. I'm opposed to tyrannical government control. That's when I called you and talked to you about this. I'm like,
Right.
maybe you can walk me through what's really going on. Control from who? And that's when you brought up the idea of the cabal. And I said,
Right.
I'd like to have you on. And so I'm going to stop my share. And if you could just take me through what the heck is going on. What is the cabal? Who are these people? If it's really a global thing, is it really, first off, let me just ask you, do you really think this is a global effort that's been going on for a few years to try to actually control people?
It's absolutely global. It absolutely comes from the outside of this country. Its form in our country is the Democrat Organized Crime Party. And we'll go into the parties and everything, but it's almost reached a point around the world that countries and parties and politicians and even religions, the sides are not what you think they are. They never have been. And what we're starting to find is it's not the Democrats versus the Republicans, because the Democrat Organized Crime Party kind of owns the rhinos. They own the Republicans in name only. And what the separation is, you're starting to find, a term, white hats and black hats. In each organization, there are people that are for freedom, and then there are people that are for the control. And we're seeing this play out in revolution. We're seeing this play out in families. We're seeing this play out at a country level. We're seeing it among friends. And it's like this politics of divisiveness that has been pushed and hoisted upon us. And the question that you brought up too the other day is, who's doing this and why? And to understand this, you kind of have to step back and clear your mind of everything that you've been taught before, because it's like the Billy Joel song, "We Didn't Start the Fire," which I think we've all heard that, and kind of go and play just a moment of it.
Go ahead and share your screen so we can see what
Yeah, can you see it?
No, not yet.
Oh gosh, you can't see anything, huh? Okay, let me see. I thought we were on that.
I can see your smiling face and mine.
All right, there we go. We got screen 2 up there. Okay.
There we go. There's the lyrics.
All right, good. Okay, that's how I had a couple images before, but anyways, this idea, the reason I bring up the Billy Joel, "We Didn't Start the Fire." And it's a great song. It's just so interesting when you hear the lyrics and all, but when you get to that refrain, "It's always burning since the world's been turning." This is basically comes down to, two things, good versus evil, I think, in the end. You know, it comes down to black and white, it comes down to up and down, it comes down to differences. And what they want to do is keep you as confused as possible so you never see the teams, you never see the players on the board. It's not that, you know, that we have two groups representing us, it's that we have two groups that are actually representing the globalists and the world elite that kind of run this, which comes down to the central bankers, and we'll get into that. But it's that they are almost up there on stage. You know, I call them, when we'll just talk about politics in Washington to begin with, it's Republicrats and Democrats. And there's no difference between the two in a lot of ways. They get up during the day and they, you know, put on theater in the houses of Congress, and at night they share cocktails and hookers. And they are, what goes on inside of the bubble or inside of the beltway is not about the people. They can campaign like Reagan in the off years, and then they get to DC and they compromise like Chamberlain in front of Hitler. And it's like, how does this happen to these people? Well, this is kind of what the cabal is. It sucks people in before they know or understand what it is. And they become kind of the spokespeople and the tools for it, because what they do is they basically, and this is what's going on now, but it's been going on a long time. We'll get into the history. But what they do is they basically bribe, extort, you know, do anything to hold this over people.
Well, who's
that are represented leaders.
But Kelly, you got to start us off somewhere, man.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that when I reached out to you, I was hoping that you could give me, who is this? Okay.
Well, you know, there is a lot of setup to that. Okay. So when we get into the who, okay, cabal. All right. We'll just start with the, you know, a secret political clique or faction. The contrived schemes of a group of persons secretly united as in a plot as to overturn the government. Okay. And so, you know, there's a lot of synonyms, but also known as, you know, there's not really an official name for this organization, and it doesn't organize like your, you know, local Boy Scouts or any other type of group that, you know, is an organization. It's a loosely, you know, held together organization, but it's an ideology that's taught early on in the schools. It's taught to people over their lifetime to understand. And the people that you start to hear about this are at the worldwide level and in the USA, and they're referred to as a lot of things, as you can see on the screen. The globalists, the elites, the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs, Davos, which is a group that meets in, you know, Switzerland every year with elite bankers and politicians and leaders of Hollywood and media. You know, they all fall under what's called the New World Order, basically. And each of these things has a lot to unpack in them, but just to make you familiar with some of the names. The United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, these things run by Klaus Schwab and some of these other people. But these are things outside of the United States. And then other names that would be in there as individuals. Certainly George Soros comes to mind as someone who would be considered part of this group of the cabal. And their intention is, and it has always been, to rule the world. They have a history that goes back. But before I get into that, in the USA, so there's a lot of organizations in worldwide, but also in the US. There's the Council on Foreign Relations, which the Bushes and all kinds of people that are involved in, the Bohemian Grove and many, many more. And, you know, this is just a nice little, what is a little meme there of kind of who these people are and what it looks like. And when you see this, you're like, that looks like Kissinger, and that looks like Klaus Schwab and some of these people. And what's really interesting it's amazing how in the United States government, we always have a Henry Kissinger or there's a big new, whatever his name was under Carter. And all of a sudden these people are appointed from the world that, control foreign policy. I mean, Kissinger's Secretary of State at some time, I believe. And, and these people do not have the intention in the US. And if you go back and dig into this, you're kind of seeing what it looks like now. But this has been going on, as we alluded to in the Billy Joel song, forever. It goes back to the 1940s. It goes back beyond that. It goes back as far as time that we record history. Because when you start to, and we'll get into that, but basically what they do and what these groups do is they are all kind of bound together by a lot of the liberal ideas and a lot of information that exists out in the public right now. And the first one that comes to mind is the Agenda 21. Okay. And what that is, and that is probably as close as anything to describing what is called the Great Reset. And what's interesting about things like that, 10 years ago, when you told people about Agenda 21 or a Great Reset, or we're going to a global currency or a one world government, to be like, oh, that's propaganda. That's not true. Come on. And what's interesting, and you can see this up here, what were once conspiracies are looking like truth nowadays. All these things.
Dude, yeah, that's where, the rabbit hole for me, it started with a buddy of mine saying I should look up the 9/11 tragedy from 2001 and look up Tower 7. And then I went down that rabbit hole for a while. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. If this is a one-off, that's one thing. And it was at the time, for my view, it was a one-off. Maybe the Bushes had oil money as their driver, and they basically looked like they set up a war, effectively, this war on terror. So, but now what I'm seeing just yesterday in the news and what I'm seeing worldwide, it's way more evil than what I initially thought was just the Bushes wanting control of the money. This is like, what? So
yeah, and again, that comes down to, well, and I think I said this the other day, but still, this idea that seeing is believing. You can see things on the internet, you can see things on TV, you can see Photoshop, and you come to realize maybe you can't believe what you see. But maybe believing is seeing. And by that, once you know what to believe about the cabal, this group of people that are, bent on controlling things, you start to see it in everything. And it's a case of, you'll see it in a children's textbook, you'll see it in the news, you'll see it in how articles are written. They all have a certain bend that they're leading towards goals. And so what they do with this and this propaganda and the mainstream media and all this is work to keep people kind of behind, keep them confused and unaware of what's really going on. And they've been doing this with video and movies back to the time of when Hollywood began, because Hollywood, and it's interesting, you go back to about 1913, 1914, and it really set up this world we're in right now. But the cabal has been around for centuries and thousands of years. Okay. And we'll, again, we're just unpacking from the top, and we're going to get down into those things.
And I want to dive into that for just a minute.
Okay.
I noticed you renamed Hollywood to Hollywood. I'm entertained by that, but at its real basic root, I think the reason that I'm passionate and interested in this, and the reason I spend time thinking about it and then interviewing people like you, is because I have come to the belief system that there is an actual subversive war of good versus evil going along. And it's the belief system that leads me as a Christian to thinking this is good versus evil, love versus fear. And the lady that got arrested just yesterday, Tamara Litch, was basically saying at the end of her interview there, I didn't play it, but she said, don't forget that we're acting in love. She's talking about the truckers.
Right.
She was addressing that to the truckers. She says, don't forget we're here protesting against tyrannical fear. And you've got a responsibility. This is gonna get worse and I'm gonna get arrested, but you've got a responsibility not to fight back outside of love. And so she's advocating exactly what I was sitting here thinking about for the last few months, that this is a war, a spiritual war. And then you mentioned Hollywood. Do you know that I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or not, Hollywood is the wood that they used in a magician's wand. Way back in the day, if you were into witchcraft, a magic wand was made out of Hollywood.
Interesting.
And that's how that town got its name. So fascinating to me, but I'd like you to just, as you, and we're going to run over time here.
We're going to be left somewhere in the middle that we'll have to wrap up and tell people it's all about curiosity. But we'll get to that.
And I'll tell you, if you're listening to this and this is some interesting stuff to you, I'll place some links at the bottom of this video so you can follow up on these things. But so anyway, let's go to, I'm reading your screen.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's start off with this concept and just take the preposition or the supposition that I might be right. I don't know if you agree with me or not, that this is actually a good versus evil. This is like God versus Satan kind of thing, love versus fear. And if it is spiritual in nature, right, then at its root, I'm curious about the history, and most important in the back of my mind is what to do about it besides pray, right? So as we cruise through here, kind of keep that as my goals in mind as you teach me about this.
Yeah, there's so much to that, and certainly to boil things down, I always, and I'll take you through this, but I always say everything comes down to two things. And it's always two things.
What are the two things?
I don't know, but it's always two things. And that's the point in it, that it's a binary universe. Computers are ones and zeros. Choice leads to circumstances. And you make certain choices and, you have one after another. And if it's not a binary world, it's certainly bipolar, that, things tend to line up on one side or the other. And so in this idea of good versus evil, white hats and black hats, it's just this whole up and down, right and left. Anything that exists has polarity to it, basically, or it has a difference in the way things are. And so when you boil it all down, there's a lot of shades of gray that when you first look at it, but in the end, the black and white, you separate out and you see what lies on the side of truth and what doesn't. And so this cabal, and talking about in terms of spiritual and good and evil and, right and wrong and all the rest, it's set up to make us, make a choice. And we really are at this time to choose. And when I say that, it's like, we're faced with all these issues from our nation to, do you believe in God or what's happening in the world and all the rest of these
exactly
things.
Right. And I've actually, it harkens me back to an old Bob Dylan song. You got to serve somebody. You
Yeah.
might serve the devil or you might serve the Lord, but you've got to serve somebody. And
You're gonna say,
I
yeah.
have been feeling so strongly that, the people that are in my closest inner circle, the ones that I enjoy spending time with and talking to, they've either chosen a side
I know.
or they're on the fence. But if you've chosen the opposite side from me, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking. It's
It's
almost,
really hard, and they feel the same way.
yeah, they
And
don't
we've
want to hear
got
it.
this difference, and this is what the cabal does. They take advantage of these things and then wedge them apart. Young, old, black, white, male, female. They basically end up incriminating human nature, because most of these things are just, you ask somebody, are you shy? Yeah, I'm shy, but I'm really outgoing. And then you ask them, well, I'm outgoing, but I can be shy too. These things, they like to identify one thing or another and make you get on them, but they're more just, spectrums of how people react to things. And so they take what, is a normal thing, and they try to create these sides so they can get people against each other. And the cabal sits up here, and whether it's Democrats and Republicans fighting over an issue and you think you're fighting over it, they don't care who wins, because they're going to win either way, because they control both sides. And what they really are, and what these people are, is they control the money. And this comes down to the central banks and the central bankers. And more than anything, and this, we're going back, 1913 was when the Federal Reserve was established here in the United States. Now, there's a whole lot that led up to that. 1900, the silver, and William Jennings Bryan's, Brian Jennings, and the populism that went on, which is very reminiscent of the populism going on today, is they cried for the silver. Well, what ended up happening, the people wanted to have the silver as their currency, a people's currency. What ended up happening was the Morgans and the Rothschilds and the bankers ended up setting up the Federal Reserve, on one of those Christmas Eve deals in 1913, and it would control the currency of the United States.
Somebody's
But don't
pinging me and
worry.
saying there's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve.
Yeah,
It's
well, of
private.
course not.
Okay.
It's like most things of the laughter of the politics. The title is the exact opposite. I mean, the Affordable Care Act. Come on,
That's hilarious.
These are not true.
Well,
They put them out there. And
so on your screen, I see 1960, the plan. I'm curious
Yeah.
about the rest of that graphic.
Well, yeah, let me just say the rest. Okay, this World War I, World War II, MK Ultra, mind control, shaping opinion. These are all the things they do with the box. Now, the box started as your radio in the 1920s. In the 1950s, the TV came in, and that was where the movies really got involved. And you'll find that the CIA has been involved in a lot of this stuff. So they're creating this image and this information getting out to people, and they do it through a lot of ways. And we can talk about Saul Linsky in another show, but just to bring up how they define the different institutions of society and how they attack them and take control for their own use is all part of tying into, let's say, what this 1960 plan has been. And so this 1960 plan is basically Khrushchev, we're going to take you down. And I'll read it. It might not be clear with the gray, but we cannot expect Americans to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving Americans small doses of socialism until they suddenly wake to find they have communism.
Whoa.
That was basically the start of the Cold War heavy.
Who's Nikita Khrushchev?
Khrushchev was he was Putin of his day. He was a leader of Russia.
Khrushchev was the Putin of 1960, basically, in Russia.
Yeah, he was, what do they call him? Their prime minister or their president.
Russia
He's a
has.
president of Russia. I think it's a
And
president.
so what's the result? 2019, obviously, this meeting.
Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, the results of 1960. I often say, well, the results is what we have, which is your Democrat organized crime party. And if you, think about this fella right here, Barack Obama, when he came in and what he had promised and everything. To me, Barack Obama came in 2008, which was 40 years after Chicago, the Chicago riots. And I always it seems biblical because 40 years is a biblical thing. And I always think 1968 was when the unholy alliance came together of the modern Democrat Party. And by that, I mean, the Democrats and Republicans used to kind of see America as the same thing. But in 68, and with the war and everything going on, the Democrat Party got more and more radical. And a lot of this was the influence of communism and the war going on and the Chinese and the Russians wanting us to, end the war and having their people over here influencing things. Because as a free country, people can come in here and influence it. And I believe that we have mobs from every country in the world that operate in our country. But in 68, you had the unholy alliance come together in the streets of Chicago. It was the anti-war, the environment, the bra burning, hate the economy, free love, all these groups that were kind of disgruntled, fringe groups is what the Democrat Party decided in 1968 they would build around. So they
let me pause
nominated.
you right there. Let me pause you right there. So and I just full disclosure, I used to be in that camp. I identified as a tree loving hippie. I've just I loved, I still do. I love everybody. And I want everybody to get along. And if you're gay, you're gay. It should be legal for you to get married and have the same tax breaks, which is effectively what I think of marriage as. If the only thing that I'm really never bought in on was the idea that abortion was a good thing. I've never bought into that.
That what was?
That abortion, legalized abortion. Yeah. I don't think that there's.
No, you can't say killing babies is good.
I don't say it, and I never have. Even when I was in my hippie loving, free love kind of days, I didn't believe in abortion. But there were so many.
Always choose life.
I do too, and there's always sort of this part of me that believed that I'm a good person because I want equality across the globe as best as we can. I want to save the children. I sponsored kids that were starving. I really love people. And it seemed to me politically that the programming, I guess you could call it, that was coming down the pipe, because you mentioned MK Ultra, you mentioned mind control, this sort of thing. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with, but I studied neurolinguistics programming. For a while. And so it made me completely and acutely aware that the language that you use and adopt for yourself, it becomes part of your own belief system. And the language that you hear, like my dad had a policy, I loved it when we were growing up, no TVs in the bedroom, and you can't leave your radio on when you go to sleep. And I was like, well, that's silly, The reason that he gave was really fascinating. And as I've gotten older, I believe he's right. The reason he gave was when you're awake and you hear something, you can filter it and decide whether it's true or not. When you're asleep, you're being programmed. That was his reasoning back when I was this tall,
Right.
I think he's right on. And so I think as part of that programming, I came to not like Republicans. I came to not like conservatives because they opposed weed that I think should be legal to this day. I think weed should be legal. And they...
Well, freedom needs no regulations.
I like that phrase. I haven't heard that before, but I
That's
like
mine.
that phrase.
That's mine.
All right. Well, keep going. So you ended up with the
Okay, so
results of
you know,
the-
I was you know, this Democrat Party, which you know evolves all the time. Remember when Barack Obama evolved one day? And
No.
but at any rate, in '68,
What do you mean he evolved one day? Or he ended up in
when
power?
all of a sudden when he was like anti, you know, gay marriage going into the election, then one day he evolved, and then the whole world was late, and the media, you know, everybody that believed what he said he believed the day before was, you know, then a racist the next day.
Oh, I
You
did
know,
not
because
know
of the
that.
way they evolve. This is what that's a whole nother set of things to unpack about how the media distorts and lies, which we, you know, have to put off to another time because you could spend forever on that. But what I want to say too, then again, about this, you know, unholy alliance that came together. And, you know, you say, you know, well, geez, you know, I felt that way too. And there's a great saying by Winston Churchill, or he's credited with it. When you're young, if you are not liberal, you have no heart. When you're mature, if you're not conservative, you have no brain. So I think that.
Oh, wait, pause. I got to let that soak in.
Okay.
Winston Churchill, I've been a fan of his for a long time.
He's
Winston
great,
Churchill.
you know, but
he says, when you're young and you're not a liberal, you have
if you
no
are
heart.
not liberal, you have no heart.
And then when you're old,
Mature, we'll call
mature,
mature.
like me, mature, 49.
Yes.
Mature. When you're mature, if you're not a conservative, you have no brain.
That's what he said. And it works well for me. It's always a good comeback to young children
That's pretty
who
deep.
have just learned about politics 2 days ago and come home screaming and shouting to put a Beto sticker on your car because they heard it in assembly class. But okay, this is how the Democrat organized crime party works. I often say, you know, I'm not a member of an organized political party. I'm a Republican. You know, because compared to how the Democrat is a corporation, they work that way. They work by an ideology. They train the children's from the TV to the school to everything else that they will line up and go, you know, run across 5 lanes of traffic to save a kitten. You know, they don't understand the consequences, but they got that big heart, and that big heart is a good thing. And sometime I'll talk about how I'm almost ready for a new party, you know, and it can combine the best of both. But what we have to understand too, and we're not talking about the cabal as much, but it exists within our political system. And we'll have to talk more about it in other episodes too. But in our political system, the way they divide us is the perfect example of the cabal. Like I was saying, the Republicans and Democrats, there's no difference. They don't care who wins the election because they're in control of who it is, because they control the people, but they do it through the money. They do it through the central banks, which is where we were. And getting on the central banks, getting on 1913, right before World War I, which ties into when video started to go. And, you know, this last century has been amazing with the amount of communication, and I won't get off on that, but, you know, just go down the list, you know, post office to telegram to radio to TV to internet to your pineal gland communicating with each other, but that I won't get into at all. Okay, so it's one thing after another, and they keep ramping it up. So now this modern Democrat Party that came out of the disgruntled, you know, they've left those people because they used to say we're for the working people, but they've stopped being for the working people because the working people have caught on to their lies and long enough, and they don't want to, you know, be for these tax and spend. So their new people are the, you know, basically I wouldn't call them ignorant, but let's say that they are unaware because they're either, you know, new arrivals to the US that don't speak the language, that can't get very into understanding, but can understand free things when they see it. I've heard of people that are at citizenship things. And as soon as you're signed in as a citizen, the Democrats come up to him and offer him how to get on welfare and how to get all this aid and everything else. And oh yeah, how to vote Democrat for your whole life. You know, this whole thing with the border, the things when Nancy Pelosi says, we need to have 16-year-olds vote. We need to capture them while they're young. It's like, really? I mean, some of the things that she says that get caught are unbelievable. And I'm like, no, take the vote to 22, unless you're in the military, which is the only reason they moved it back, you know, to 18 was because kids were getting drafted for Vietnam. So this new party is now evolved around all of these new and combative and divisive things, you know, as simple as the wall. Oh, a wall's racist. Oh my, how can it be? You know, math was racist under Barack Obama, because if you could do math, you realize that the whole healthcare thing was a lie. And all it took was some math to figure it out. But you know, they will get on everything. So this whole group, and this ties into the Saul Linsky, and this then happens at Saul Linsky. I'll just say a couple words about him. He is, and we'll have to talk about him some other time, but he is basically an author, a radical, a revolutionist that came out of Chicago, which is, by the way, the headquarters of communism in the United States of America. And but he came out of Chicago. He came out of actually working with the mafia. I think Dinesh D'Souza does a nice piece on him at one point. And he basically, you know, set this up, that they were how to go after the education system, the media, the news, the government, the courts, the food system, all these things that are breaking down right now, that are kind of falling apart, which has to do with other bigger cycles, and again is you know, part of the plan of the cabal, that it's all designed to kind of bring this all down at once. And the Democrats have been doing this for a long time, and they're near their end game, you know, and something happened to them in 2016 which they didn't expect, and we all know what that was. But it certainly woke up a lot of people.
At its basic level, I still am not convinced that the cabal is behind all of this that you've been talking about.
Good.
We've got about 5 minutes left. So
okay,
how can you convince?
Let me do some things, because what you want to do is start drawing lines on and start, you know, connecting points. And look at, just as we started here in the beginning, you bring up Canada. Look who shows up at these Canadian trucker things. Antifa? Okay. Where else has Antifa showed up?
Black Lives Matter protests.
Black Lives Matter. They will show up and
Occupy Wall
anywhere.
Street.
Occupy Wall Street. They will show up at any Trump rally. Two Trump people grab a flag and stand on a corner, and I guarantee Antifa will show up. You know, they are there. And the point in this, and I can get off on Antifa and tell you a whole bunch of stuff about that, but the point is to start to see who these people are that work for them. And one of the hardest things for people to start to do, and they have to do this to understand, is assign some credible, you know, responsibility to people on what they say. And I'm not talking about just like, you know, lock Hillary up or, you know, that type of thing. But you have to, when you watch the news, you can't just say the news says this and they say this and that. You really have to understand at a deeper level. What network said that? What have they said in the past? Who was the broadcaster? What has he done? Where has he fallen down? Where have they done this? Because they just keep trotting out the same stuff. And what's interesting is ever since, you know, 2016 and Trump got on the fake media, look what's happened to CNN. Look what's happened to MSNBC.
That's exactly right. We're at a point
when you
now
see
where
Rachel Maddow leaving and some of these people taking off, you're like, wow, they might be getting close to some of this. So, and again, you can get twisted off, but again, the first point in that is start to look at who the Antifa is, who the BLM. These are Obama's brown shirts. Brown shirts, refers back to, you know, Nazi Hitler, 1933. These are the thugs that are kind of like what they call NGOs, which are another terrible thing. These are these non-government organizations that are often run by Soros money, and they're all around the world. And they come in and they have official sounding names like the Federal Reserve, and they set up shop and they become lobbyists and do this stuff in different countries. But they act on these globalist views.
I have heard that, and we got to wrap up, but I'll end this statement. I think that last point you made was a good one, connecting the dots. And I'll tell you that you just connected some dots for me, because I heard and then watched a couple of videos where the folks that were migrating across the border back in the day, I think it was during Trump's election cycle back in 2015 or 2016. They got mad because they didn't get paid. Some of them got mad because they didn't get paid from George Soros. And so they picketed against George Soros for not paying them for being part of that parade. So you've helped me connect some dots. We'll have to come back.
And the reason why you see that is because you have to seek the truth. The lies are painted 6 coats deep, and then even more than lying and spinning, what the media does is they omit, and they just don't let you know. So the normal everyday person on the street who sees Reuters and the local news, they're never going to hear anything. So they don't know how long they've been in this, bubble that they cannot get the truth penetrated. So this is what you're doing, what we're doing, what all these people are doing, this citizen journalism, taking on this corporate media, which includes basically the 6 networks that run it all. And so you just can't fit this stuff in a short period of time. And I'll put a shout out to the women who did the Fall of the Cabal, and now they're on their 3rd one. They can't unpack it in 30 or 40 episodes. And it's not that you can't start to understand it and see it. It's just that you're overwhelmed by how far these tentacles go. And some people that actually are part of the system don't even know the system exists because they can't get out and see it. So hopefully we can get to people to where they can get outside of their situation, because we only touched on the 20th century, basically. We didn't go anywhere else on this.
Well, Kelly G, thank you so much for your time. You've definitely given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure the audience as well. But I do appreciate you, and I'll put the links to what we discussed below, including Fall Cabal.
I got a couple of other links if you want those, and I can include those. And James, you're doing a great thing here. I appreciate you taking the time and putting this out, because more people are waking up, and it's coming down to the one-on-one, and how can you convince people to at least just, don't fall for it. Take a look at things. And
amen. Thank you for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. I appreciate you, Kelly G.
You betcha, bro. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
Look.